Alright everybody, I'm back at it with films I'm willing to talk about again. This time with another new bonus. Another film had recently come out in theaters, and I'm more than prepared to have a full review of it from start to finish. It's basically yet another way to capitalize on the events of the famous July 1969 event known as Apollo 11. Or Project Artemis. It's gone by several names over the years. But in this case, the film Fly Me to the Moon, which recently came out, specifically discusses the details of both the assembly of the Apollo 11 rocket in the months that spanned from the time that the project was first announced in NASA to the time the launch took place in July of 1969. The mission to go to the moon, but for Russia. It was the famous space race which had carried on for more than a decade between the United States and Russia. Basically at the height of the Cold War, in the many years that followed after the end of World War II, there was basically a number of things that went alongside both Russia and the States. America, of course, had their eyes set on capitalistic desires, and later would come to discover Russia's plans to set off to the stars and eventually make their way to attempt to land on other celestial bodies, that of which including Earth's own moon, sometimes nicknamed Luna. But as we know, it was a long, enduring endeavor that was funded through many different ways. Through advertising, through campaigns of all sorts by political leaders, and of course a grueling battle to beat the Russians to the moon. But in any case though, with this movie, it basically starts off by giving us a full enclosure of actor Channing Tatum, who basically portrays a launch director known by the name of Cole. It's basically Cole's stressful yet important job to manage the launch sequences behind the many rockets that have come along. As we probably get to know later on in the film, he's basically known as a Korean War veteran whom eventually goes off to the field of science, mainly rocketry. And as we probably have come to realize, it's Cole's job in this film to design the Apollo 11, the one machine that is guaranteed to successfully make their trip from Earth to the moon, or else they'll die trying. Meanwhile, there's a woman over in New York who basically goes off on her own specialized campaign trip as a means to advertise various classic muscle cars. And she even goes so far to portray her own knowledge of such men within the company, such as one owning a Lincoln and another owning a Mustang Fastback. So with words like that, plus such ingenuity and cunning strategies involved in this entire conversation, she basically not only wins the likes of those men, but she also gets a special visit from a certain movie director. A director whom is rather grumbly and not in any good mood whatsoever. And that sure is worth noting. This woman, of course, is known as Kelly Jones, played by Scarlett Johansson. And as for the director in question, it's Jim Rush. But by all means, Rush is eventually escorted out, demanding a better job, while Kelly goes on along with her assistant over to find some new material to cover. They basically go so far to infiltrate Cape Canaveral, which as we know is the official NASA headquarters and the largest single-story building in the world. At least at the time it was considered to be that big. But by all means, the two women make their way inside, stealing a pass in the process from a tour director. And once they make their way inside, Cole eventually finds them and escorts them out. But not before they basically go so far to let him know they're willing to help by all means through advertising and funding no matter what happens. And they do basically earn his trust, getting their own office in the process. Though it is a bit of a mess and doesn't even have a window, which comes as no surprise. I mean, could you imagine having an office with windows around you? Man, almost every office I've ever worked in didn't have many windows. Still, the days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months. The many phone calls and broadcasts that come alongside Kelly Jones and various other crew members from within Cape Canaveral eventually spark Cole to go off on a bit of a rant. He basically figures out that they're actually committing a lot of fakery, even using Ray Romano, literally a doppelganger of his own character in the film, as some sort of advertisement, an interview that of course is complete mockery of the real man, whom they of course did not approve of in the first place. Of course, Cole did state that they were not up to interviews, and so what did Kelly and her assistant do? Improvise, like most Americans truly would. They got doppelgangers posing as the real crew members, even creating a lot of falsified info. And you know, it's these kind of lies, however, that actually spark an enormous crowdfunding campaign, and even a lot of visitors came by to visit Cape Canaveral. Of course, assembly of Apollo 11 is a long and tedious process, but even as time passes on, Cole eventually comes to like Kelly Jones. Her ideas of creating all these fabrications and all these different product placements, such as a watch from Omega, Tang drink, you know, and even Fruit by the Loom. It's just really an immense anomaly of all these different products that they have cross-promoted with NASA. Even getting the astronauts themselves, Buzz Aldrin, Lance Armstrong, and even the third member of the Apollo 11 team. All three of them are not only sporting Omega watches, drinking Tang, and wearing Fruit by the Loom, but they're also doing a number of other things. Posing for the camera, becoming a part of magazines like Time Magazine and whatnot. It's a crazy series of events that play out. Many events that are in fact just an afterthought to what the main event is. The upcoming launch of Apollo 11. And so, when that day finally comes, well, Kelly, Cole, and everybody else are all willing to set aside their differences just for this one occasion. But if there's one big thing that they hope to accomplish, it's to create footage. Yes, that's right. Apparently there was a certain man working for the President of the United States, that of which being Richard Nixon. Woody Harrelson's own character, who's basically a man that works for the president. He actually goes so far to basically create an exploit, a supposed contingency, just in case Plan A were to go wrong. Now, because of all of these supposed blackmailings that Kelly is experiencing, she actually ends up creating an entire movie set. Yeah, created from the ground up. An artificial variation of the landing on the moon, complete with 3 new actors, whom pose as the 3 astronauts. Of course, we know that only 2 of them got on the moon, while the 3rd was orbiting around the moon, waiting to pick the other 2 up. But by any means, she even has an excuse to even have Lance come around to direct the film, and he has all sorts of crazy things to say to the cast and crew members. And the thing is, when that day finally comes where they're supposed to film the launch, and of course the sequence that's generated from what's supposed to be on the real moon, but apparently the Harrelson character decided to create a sabotage to it, getting rid of the camera that was supposed to be put upon the moon itself once they landed. But thanks to some quick thinking from other fellow crew members, stealing a television to get the components necessary to replace the ones that were meant for the camera, they actually managed to, believe it or not, successfully create footage while on the moon, practically making the set useless. Of course, this sort of contingency plan, when revealed to Cole, really agitates him, you know? It's like the ultimate fakery gone wrong. He gets so mad he doesn't even want to see Kelly ever again. But yet, she just persists with the whole thing. She goes with the flow, the plan that he generated, to not only trick the Harrelson character into thinking that the moon landing was made to be real because it's an actual real camera they got onto the moon itself, but also they basically used this plan as a means to sway him into thinking that filming on the moon is actually possible after all. But you know what? Despite all this, a supposed black cat comes around. It's that little cliche that happens in this film. A black cat is a supposed sign of bad luck. Once it makes its first appearance during the initial sequence of the film itself, where Cole stops a fire that's generated in the building, and eventually there's another fire that happens at Wolfie's restaurant. The thing is, when the black cat makes its last appearance by ending up right on the set, you know, that's how they can tell the real work on the moon is actually up and running. So the Harrelson character is beyond satisfied at what he's seeing, and it basically leaves everything in that set meaningless, since everything's already happening up there in the stars. But in any case, once the mission is fully complete, everybody has a nice happy celebration. A really big one, complete with some fireworks and all kinds of red, white, and blue decorations. And in the end, once the astronauts make their full landing on the touchdown, it was certainly quite a treat. For Cole and Kelly to be on a plane, but even more of a treat once they basically tell the truth to each other. Kelly, of course, is not actually Kelly Jones. She was basically just some kind of drifter, whom apparently had her life taken away from her at a young age due to her mother being out of commission. And her father is basically MIA. So she was forced to live upon this life where, as a drifter, she would adopt different identities and create different versions of her own work. Advertising, secretary work, a number of different things that she would do over the years until meeting up with Cole at Cape Canaveral. And so, in the end, when all differences are set aside and all truths are finally revealed to each other, it's a true happy ending. One of a kind that makes this movie more than satisfying. Overall, Fly Me to the Moon sure was a nice big way to leave me fully satisfied. And not just any form of the 1969 launch. Of course, there was First Man starring Ryan Gosling, and there were a number of other films that came out in recent years which made a much bigger focus on the many effects that could pretty much bring the moon landing to life. And we certainly can't forget that famous quote that was generated by Armstrong himself after he touched down on the moon. So, of course, with all that in mind, I give this film a solid 8.3 out of 10.1. While it's not necessarily masterpiece level quality, it has a great cast to it with some memorable names all around, as well as some that I'm willing to look into a little bit more. And then, of course, you have the action, you have the drama, you have some comedic bits to help keep you entertained for a while. And then you have all the exciting actions that happen up in space. It's something that nobody could dislike. Even if space does seem a bit of a redundant idea nowadays, it's still a concept that real life truly has yet to experience. At least by a community level. It's a very, very hard and difficult process to get anyone to go up into space in general, because there's so much money that has to be put into it. But maybe what if one day we could adopt the ideologies that were generated from the likes of both Cole and Kelly in this film? This series of, let's say, fabrications to help generate money and create a nice big crowdfunding service that would actually allow for space tourism to become a reality. once and for all. After decades of dreaming about it, it could actually be real. But you know what? That has yet to be determined. But I'm certain it can be done. It just needs a bit of time to it. And money, of course. That's all. So you know what? This was quite a pretty big entry to put in here. But I'm still quite happy to have actually gotten that one out of the way. And do be sure to stay tuned, because next weekend I'm going to have another new film to go through. This one will be even bigger of a blockbuster, as the advertising to this one was even bigger, and I'm sure the anticipation from all these Universal fans around the globe are going to be tremendously high. So do be sure to check it out next Sunday for when I review Twisters.
I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.